So Vibia Perpetua of Carthage, who was born around AD 182, was martyred in 203 AD. And she became a very culturally important person in the 3rd century as a result of this. She's an early martyr and one of the first women. Thecla has a story that has a sort of a martyrdom in it, but we don't know when or if Thecla actually lived. Vibia Perpetua is a real person. We know when she lived. We know where she lived. We know what family she was part of. We know the details of her story, partly because she wrote her story. The Passion of Saints Perpetua and Felicity, the work that Perpetua wrote, is the earliest document in prose Latin from a female author on any topic, about anything in all of history. And it's one of the only female written documents that we have from all of antiquity. So Perpetua, who was about 22 years old-ish, was in Carthage. There was a persecution, a brief persecution, and a number of people were arrested on accusations of being Christians, and Perpetua was one of them. Vibia is a family name, by the way, and Vibia is a name that is associated with one of the large, rich, and important families in the Roman world. So she came from something. And it's not clear whether Vibia is a name that comes from her father and her father's family, but her father was prominent in local society, or whether it came from her husband and his family. But she came from money and privilege and was part of Roman society. She was married, she had an infant son, and she is arrested for being a Christian. And she stands up in front of the government and says, "Yes, I am," when she knows that this probably will lead to a sentence of death based on the circumstances. She was actually part of a class that was preparing for baptism and formal entry into the church. So she was pretty young in the faith. She had not yet been baptized at the point of her arrest. She was in the classes to prepare for that. But she wrote the journal, The Passion of Saints Perpetua and Felicity. There's the chapters that are at the front of that are chapters that Perpetua wrote, which she recounts her trial and her imprisonment. And it was continued by somebody who added other pieces and then added a description of her death in the arena. The Passion of Saints Perpetua and Felicity. Felicity was a slave woman, a slave girl who was pregnant, who was also arrested in the same thing. She may have been part of Perpetua's household, but they were martyred together as part of a group of 8 people. The Passion of Saints Perpetua and Felicity was read annually in the church at Carthage for more than 2 centuries as an annual remembrance. More than 2 centuries later, Augustine preached a series of 4 sermons on the life of Perpetua in her writings, believing her to be an important figure in the church. Her martyrdom and its account were highly revered by ancient Christians and still by many today. She rejected a series of entreaties from her father to reject the faith and return to paganism. He begged her publicly, visited her in prison, to beg with her to reject the faith and to return to paganism, which she refused to do. She was a part of a group of 8 that were sent into the arena. They were attacked by a series of wild animals, but not killed by any of that. And so they were lined up to be executed publicly by rookie gladiators, guys getting started in that. The picture on the left is from the description that the guy who was assigned to kill Perpetua botched it. He managed to stab her up by the collarbone and only wound her, and that she actually reached out and took hold of the end of the sword and lined it up with her throat and said, "Do it this way." She was martyred on March 7th in the year 203. And that date is still celebrated in many churches around the world all these years later. Felicity, the slave girl, gave birth prematurely at around 8 months to a baby girl while they were in prison. And her baby girl was raised by the women of the church. The 6 martyrs, 8 martyrs, I think it was that day, were buried together in a basilica. A large church was built a century or so later on that spot. But Perpetua became a model of female faith and courage. She was very loyal to her father and her family, as was very culture at the time, but her loyalty was to God above all. And as a young mother and a young convert to the faith, she and a pregnant slave girl became great heroes of the faith and influenced people significantly across the 3rd century and beyond. So, more about women and their influence in the church. In this era, the story of Thecla, the story of Perpetua, these were very widely read in the church and by people around the church, and hugely influential about how people thought about them. Just to remind a couple of things from last time, Perpetua, Perpetua is a Roman woman from a famous family. She's born into some wealth and privilege. It's a patrician family. She has access to people and things. Her family is wealthy and well known. And she is arrested as a Christian and proclaims her Christianity despite the fact that her father begs her to recant and to return to the pagan kind of worship of the Romans. And in prison, she writes the beginning of what becomes known as the Passion of Saints Perpetua and Felicity, a title that Perpetua seems to have chosen. Now, Perpetua is a wealthy Roman woman raised in significant luxury, and Felicity is a slave. And when Perpetua writes about the two of them being arrested for the sake of the faith, she writes about that as the two of them are on the same level, that they're peers, that they're partners. Now, Felicity is a slave. There's no one in a patrician Roman family who is raised to see a slave as at their same social level or even their same moral level. But Perpetua writes the Passion of Saints Perpetua and Felicity and puts Felicity on the same level as her. And this is what the church does in our lives, is it helps us to see that no matter what our backgrounds are, no matter how much money we have, no matter what education that we have, that we are all one in Christ, that we all stand before Him on the same level. There's no one who is better. There's no one who stands at the front because of their wealth, their background, their birth, anything like that. So very important as we think about this story of Perpetua, that we keep that in mind, that there is a sense that the lived out church here is a church where we are all Christians, no matter where we come from or where we started. Another thing that's important to keep in mind as you think about Perpetua and Felicity is, as you remember this, is that these are two women that are treated by the church and in the way that Perpetua writes about their experience as being worthy, as being significant, as being important in the life of the church. And this is a story that influenced many in the church and was seen by many as an important and significant story among the church. So this is not a story where women were lesser or off to the side. And Perpetua doesn't write as if she thinks that women in the church are less significant or less important. She writes as if they are just as important. This is very countercultural in that day.